Okay, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, wa la aqibatu lil muttaqeen, wa la udwana illa ala al-zalimin, wa salawatullahi wa salamuhu ala ashraf al-anbiya'i wal mursaleen, Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in. Allahumma la sahla illa ma ja'altu sahla, wa anta taj'alul hazna idha shi'ta sahla. Allahumma a'inna ala dhikrika wa shukrika wa husni ibadatika ya Rabbil Kareem. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So I hope you guys are doing well, inshallah. Well, yani, some of you will be doing well. Today, obviously, a shocking day for many people, a momentous day for others, and I wanted to. Some of you guys told me to make a comment on the issue of the U.S. elections, and I thought I'd do that quickly before we start the actual lesson. And there's a few things that I want to remind myself and you all here, and then those guys who are joining us online as well, of some very important things that, to be honest, we must remember and we must instill in ourselves, because it doesn't befit the Muslim to do anything but that. And frankly, to be honest, first of all, I should say, jokes aside, because obviously, here in England, obviously we've been having a right laugh at this. And making jokes out of it, whatever, and that's because, we like that kind of political humor anyway, and then secondly because the Americans gave it to us hard, when we Brexited, yes, when we did our best over Brexit, and so, and we took it like men, stiff upper lip and all that, and we took it because we deserved it. We were a bunch of plums, we did a plum action, we're suffering, even after Trump, if you thought that we could make a recovery on the pound, it hasn't even moved, right? The damage of Brexit was so much that even our pound couldn't recover. So I thought at least Trump would give us a bit more extra money back, but that didn't even work either. So, it was pretty stupid what we did. But, mashallah, it's always good to know that the Americans will always be even more stupid. So, alhamdulillah. But listen, that's all the jokes and that, like I said, just getting a little bit of revenge and having a bit of fun at their expense. But the truth of the matter is that this isn't a matter of joking. Politics has become a big joke in the last X amount of decades. And to be honest, most of the greatest comedians at the moment are political satirists and their comments on politics. And it is actually probably the funniest form of politics at the moment. But this isn't a joke, because the American US presidential elections were... we watched it for, day and night for the last X amount of months, and things were serious. And especially when it comes to minorities, the wider minorities, meaning blacks, Latinos, and other folks, and then specifically, of course, the Muslims. And we have a vested interest in this as people of the West, but more importantly, as Muslims, with respect to our aqeedah and how we understand siyasa and politics. I just wanted to spend just a few minutes on just reminding myself and yourself of some of the etiquettes of how we respond to something like this. Listen, as I said, there are many, many jokes to be had. I've been saying all day that there are, there's probably enough material in this event to last, it's a dream, a Facebook writer's dream. You could write tweets for this for the next decade. But it is a serious matter, because there are people who are in the firing line, genuine. The situation in America is something completely far removed to where we live in terms of gun control and violence and the profligacy of murder and so on. It's no joke. And in terms of Islamophobia, then it is something which is true and muhaqqaq in the USA. It's not some kind of theory, it's real. And there are a number of right-wing organizations and extreme organizations that have already expressed their delight at the victory of Trump. And Trump himself, is a nutter, he's completely insane. And, there are people out there that are going to be worried, schools, masajid, children, and the environment they're growing up in. And I've been reading studies for the last few weeks, and today especially those that have been conducted in schools, which have noticed a massive increase in bullying, because they've noticed that you're able to, watching Trump and how he deals with, political criticism from the media or from other critics, and the way that he responds to them. And then his body language when in the debates, very dismissive and very aggressive, and the way that he was responding in his election, his campaign evenings, the way that they would deal with protesters and so on. So there's been a marked increase in bullying, and even more so towards minorities because of the way that he treats them. And likewise, mental illnesses have, or the frequency or the reporting of mental problems has increased. People are genuinely stressed, genuinely worried, and so on. So this is a very, very serious thing that does deserve a real comment. And we've got to ourselves also, know that there's a time for joking. I know that there's a time for serious comment. And I think that there's about 5 or 6 different points. But the first thing I want to say is this. It's not becoming of the Muslim, any kind of Muslim, wherever they are, to be foolish and to be of low intellect. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given all of insan a brain, and we have been honored by that brain. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has ennobled human beings. وَلَقَدْ كَرَّمْنَا بَنِي آدَمَ, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, that we have ennobled the son of Adam with these specific characteristics to use that intellect to good account. And a Muslim even more so. And the Prophet ﷺ, he told us that whenever we do something, then do it excellently. Ihsan and itqan are 2 fundamental principles of our existence. We must always be clever, smart, and strong, and so on. And when we get lazy in the way that we comment and the way that we think, then it looks bad upon our religion. Rightly so, we are representatives of our religion. And so, for example, like we often made the mistake, especially in the early days after Brexit, saying that there are 17.4 million racists. And for us now to assume that there's like 50 million, or I don't know what percentage of it, how many actually of the popular vote, of how many people actually did vote for Trump. Was it 250 million electorate? Yes. And 25% of the vote, was it? Yeah, so whatever that is, 50, 60, 70 million people that might have voted for him. For us to assume that everyone's a xenophobe and Islamophobic and racist is also ignorant. It's ignorant, it's not factual, it's not becoming of the Muslim to make such statements. There's no doubt that nearly every racist and nearly every xenophobe and Islamophobic person did vote for Trump, but that doesn't mean that everyone who voted for Trump was Islamophobic and racist. And as Shazad said to me earlier on today, and it is absolutely clear, frankly, this election and every protest vote is the economy stupid. That's it. Okay, it's always about the economy. It's always about people who are desperate to save their job, who are desperate to preserve their finances and to look after their family. And when push comes to shove, everyone will do anything to protect their family. And frankly, Hillary Clinton, corrupt, aloof, nothing to do with the people, pulled an absolute number on Bernie Sanders. The DNC, the Democratic National Committee, they completely played him as well. And he was a person who should have gone through and would have represented and been a real genuine change to a corrupt system. She went forward with her corrupt contacts, and she did not offer any possible change to what people cared about most. And that's something much more than terrorism and foreign policies and Mexicans and rapists and Muslims or whatever. It's all nonsense. It's what matters is what people care about most, which is their income and their finances. And in that, there's a very important reminder. Like I said, 2 reminders. 1, stop being so general, so blasé, stop patronizing good people who are desperate to make some kind of change and a protest at what they see as a corrupt system. And we shouldn't just write them all off at the same time. And then at the same time, the second reminder that comes from that point is that we should recognize that in our individual roles, when we react to something like this, we are people who then react and organize and then do things as doing people. And as part of our doing people, you've seen a lot of people saying that we're going to get back more involved in politics and so on and so forth, which is good, and I'll come to that in a minute. But what we should have focused on more is that how can we increase the economic well-being of the people in our society? Because our own reality and our stability is completely underpinned and linked to that economic well-being. And this is a reality which happens all over the world in all societies. And if you go back to Bosnia and if you go back to other problem areas, you'll see that when people are comfortable and they have no real reason certainly economically to have a grudge and to find a problem, then you just take away that one major motivation. Then a person needs to be really ideologically motivated to attack you and to hate you. And frankly, people aren't that bad in general. And we've got to assume better of the people. So ourselves, when we look at our own abilities, when we look at, for example, students who study, they should be thinking, how is it that I can best perform and earn the very best myself individually, financially, but also give back to society? How can I make sure that in my lifetime I'm earning the most, but also making sure that when I pass, I leave all of that? Because how honorable it is to earn a lot in your life, and how dishonorable it is to die with it all, as they say. And we should be looking to make sure that we give back in our lives and in our deaths when it comes back to our community, establishing businesses, funding scholarships, giving people jobs, helping the economy. These are real things. Supporting charities, supporting food banks and those people who are in need. These are the things that will not be forgotten. So before the political engagement that needs to come as a result of such a shock protest vote, and I don't even mean even if you're not part of a shock area or protest vote, I'm talking across the board, wherever you are, in a non-Muslim community or even a Muslim community, it doesn't matter which community you live in. We have to understand that people, if they feel threatened, they will react negatively always. And so that's something which I think is very, very important. Before we organize ourselves politically, before we start to talk about the political system, we need to civically, socially, and economically look at ourselves and our community and make sure that we do not allow those conditions to occur that could also cause us instability as well. That's the most obvious point. The second point I wanted to say is that obviously this shows that there is another proof that the democratic system is flawed. Now, from a theological point of view, as Muslims, we know that already. Democracy is a rule of the people for the people, something which was not legislated by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and therefore, of course, it's going to be, as a man-made system, going to be flawed compared to the divine system of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's socialism, that's communism, that's capitalism, that's democracy, that's liberal secularism, that's every ism other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's deen, al-Islam. So that's a given. And these things just prove it. And I just say that because Muslims mustn't lose, over the last 10 years, we have lost many, many Muslims to the ideological warfare that capitalism or neoliberalism is actually better for Muslim communities because that's what they enjoy and their wealth that they enjoy in the West. And because they don't see Islam and they associate Islam with, backwardness and Taliban and ISIS and whatever, they can never imagine that there is something like a financial system there or a proper system of laws. And so what they take is what's in front of them. And when you are faced with that and you live it and you benefit from it, then you start to worship the system itself. And we have Muslims who do worship democracy and liberalism and neoliberalism and so on. And you know what? It's important to remind ourselves when things like this happen, when we allow people to vote in a system where they shouldn't really be given that right to be voting over important things and the livelihoods and the safety and security of other people, we see that actually people can never be trusted in these democratic systems. And they can really come and sting you. And the fact that it's broken anyway, the fact that more people actually voted for Hillary, not that I could give a monkeys about Hillary, but the popular vote was actually more for Hillary anyway. So not only do we not believe in a system actually in terms of its divine solution or any kind of solution for the people compared to the alternatives, but even when it's applied, it's a system of hypocrisy. It's a system which is frauded and corrupt because Donald Trump shouldn't have won even according to democratic law. And the debates that go on all the time about how the votes should be done in proportional representation and which form should be applied and so on and so forth. So that's another point to remember, that have some izzah in your own system and your own belief and your own deen. And know that when people come to you and start to kind of talk down at you and say that you people are the backwards ones, you are the women haters, you are the ones who are violent, you are the X whatever, and you should be believing in freedom of speech and whatever, you should remind this fool who would dare say something like that to you, that tell me the value that you want me to follow you in. Which Western liberal value do you want me to follow? Your freedom of speech, the one that prohibits our children from expressing themselves in cartoons and paintings, your freedom of speech that does not allow the freedom of sexually abusing women, attacking them, bullying people, being racist towards people. These are the values that you do, that you want to promote. Don't for 1 second be made to live the inferiority complex that your lives are being portrayed to be as Muslims. This is very, very important. But as a follow-up to that, and it is important to say that we are people of reality. There are no other political systems that we live in the West. And therefore, it is incorrect that our criticisms of democracy does not mean that we shouldn't engage it. And we must, and it's the only other option that we have. And the only way that we can actually make change, because don't think that people are going to change the system en masse, on whole, as some kind of revolution and change to another ism. It's going to remain as this liberal, capitalist, democratic systems across the West. So they have to be engaged. This is not a time for political apathy. And there's anger, there's no doubt about it, but that's the only thing which is there. This was always known by our scholars when they gave the fatwa to, it's the lesser of two evils to engage with the system, or it's an obligation to work within whatever it means you have to make things for the better. Scholars always knew that the sting in the tail. They always knew it was a mess. So don't be surprised by that. So that's another point. The other issue, of course, is just how many people are so scared and complaining. Now, look, Trump, forget Trump. Honestly, just forget Trump. I mean, are you honestly kidding me? Are we that weak? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran, does He at any moment encourage the Muslims to ever be afraid of anything from the dunyai paradigm, from anything in our lifetimes or in our life, as the way that we are showing, that of some theoretical harm that's going to come from Trump and his presidency? Now, I know that there are threats and dangers, real threats and dangers, especially for people living in Islamophobic areas in the States, that will be empowered now and feel that they've got the right to do things which Donald Trump, probably, I still believe, that won't even have the guts to actually action. But he's already, lit the fire, he's already said what he's got to say, and he's already given the people the fuel to believe that they can say and do what they want at the expense of minorities. But that fear is not becoming of the Muslim. We only fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is not, there's not a difficulty ever in the history of mankind that mankind has not recovered from, let alone the Muslims. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He goes into the Quran and discusses so many stories have a very key function. They're things that people find easy and digestible to listen to and learn from. And when you look at the stories in the Quran, many of them about Bani Israel and Musa alayhi salam and his ability to be able to guide his people out of the most incredible difficult situations. And many of the prophets of Bani Israel. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says one thing about Bani Israel: وَنَجَّيْنَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَكَانُوا يَتَّقُونَ. That in the most horrible and the most impossible and difficult circumstances, what happened? That we saved the people who believed. وَكَانُوا يَتَّقُونَ. Why? Because they had taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So I'm telling you now, and every single person who's here and whoever's abroad and whoever's in the States, that the only thing that's going to help you, is your iman in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and to always have taqwa of Him, to always be aware of Him. وَنَجَّيْنَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَكَانُوا يَتَّقُونَ. That's two things. Iman and taqwa. That's what's going to get you out of this. That's what's going to not have the fear consume you. It's impossible for the Muslim to have a heart that's consumed of fear and then to be fearful of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in terms of our dunya and our akhirah. Impossible. And so I send this reminder as well. And I think the final point, and that's an aqeedah point. Really, we can't be lamenting and grieving and screaming and crying, and that's even more depressing than the depression that is Trump. Okay? And then the final thing I want to say. And that's about Trump himself, and I want to say that in two parts. Number one, you know what it is? We have politics by its very nature, siyasa in the Sharia, is something which is subjective. It's the matter of the people and their opinions, and there are different people who are strong and others who are weak, some people who get things done. In the Sharia itself, I want you to know, and I teach siyasa Sharia, and I taught it in detail, I taught Ibn Taymiyyah's essay on the matter as well, siyasa Sharia, and I can tell you this much, that from an Islamic point of view, all right, I'm not at all justifying Trump or this or any kind of system, but I'm saying to you from an Islamic point of view, certainly from the companions, certainly from Sayyidina Umar ibn Khattab, you will see that they would rather support a strong man than a weak man. Okay? A strong man is someone who, if there are no good options, a strong man is someone who gets something done. Now, it's not possible for us to always second guess and assume, and think, how bad Trump is and be so depressed. We lived at the time of Bush. We used to think that guy was a disaster. We thought that the world was going to end the next day. I look back on Bush, I would cry to have him back. Sah? How much did we, curse Bush? I look back at some of the things that I wrote about Bush, I can't believe it. I said that he's the most hated, I hate him more than I hate, what's her name, Katie, whatever her name is. Katie Hopkins, a dog, or maybe I don't, actually, maybe I hate Katie Hopkins more. But, the kind of things they say about Bush, I can't believe it, how much anger I used to have towards him. I look at him now, the guy's a pussycat compared to all these dogs. Yes? And then look at the opposite. So who knows where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put the khair. And then what kind of trust and madness and love and emotion do we have for the other fool, Obama? Right? Everyone crying and watching him dancing and watching him be so cool, whatever. What did he do? He killed double the people that George Bush did. He caused double the problems that George Bush did. He created far, far more problems for the Muslims around the world. More. So the person that we hated, what did they do, really? The ones that we loved and thought they were going to save the world, did exactly the opposite. So I just want to say that don't second guess life and reality, and don't put yourself in a position of the lawgiver and the one who knows everything. Who knows what's going to come from Trump? And maybe that someone who's open and just a open fraud criminal who telegraphs all his moves, and he makes it very, very clear that he's a businessman, he can be sold to the highest bidder, that he's someone who's just looking for a deal, who's just going to keep negotiating, maybe he's the right kind of person that the world might need, and certainly for America. And I genuinely believe that from the American economy point of view, he certainly can't do any worse, can he? He can't do anything worse than for the establishment. So for the Americans, from an economic point of view, the irony is that he might change their fortunes far better than other people would, and that might lead to an increase in a liberal form of democracy, which even though is against the system of Allah, is where our best hopes are for our own existence. That's the paradox that we live in. We criticize the system on one hand, and then we feed from it on the other. That's the nature of the dunya and the mess that we're in. That's what happens when you live in the West. So I don't need, we don't know about his foreign policy. Do we care so much about what his issues are? What about the other things? And this comes to the second point I want to make. Listen, this is the final point. The Prophet ﷺ said that the Muslims are like one body, where one part hurts and the other one feels that pain. Okay? I can tell you that the Muslims do not understand this hadith. And you know who really does not understand this hadith? The Muslims of the West. Okay? Sometimes when I think about it, I was thinking about this earlier on, the Muslims of the West, and I mean Brits, and I mean Americans, whatever, we're so self-centered and selfish, and we think that the world completely revolves around us. Okay? Like as if there isn't another ummah. There aren't another 1.6 billion Muslims in the world that actually matter. That these 5, 6, 7 million, 10 million, 15 million in the West are somehow the most important members of this nation. A nation which is, as I said, hundreds of millions more than what are here in the West, and they're the ones that are going through oppression, death, murder, killing, whatever. And that doesn't matter as much as what cares to us and our main things. And I'm not hating, but honestly, I sometimes think that if we were a part of that ummah, if we are a part of that body, then I think we're the backside of that body. Okay? And honestly, and every backside needs a good kicking, and this is our good kicking. As a reminder that, we're not so important in the bigger scheme of things. What if there is some khair for other Muslims around the world? What if the guy who refuses to, he decides as a part of foreign policy that he doesn't want to invade X, Y, Z, he wants to get out, whatever. If he kills all of ISIS, that's a brilliant thing if he destroys all of ISIS. I'll be delighted if he got some incredible secret plan that he's going to do and destroys ISIS. Ya zindabad if he does. And I'll be absolutely wonderful if he realizes that, the veterans and the American army and the resources that are going into it are too much and he needs to pull out and he wants to defend his borders. And you know what? If he bans Muslims coming in, then what's so bad about that either? Muslims are enough there as it is, khalas, and have more kids and increase the population over there. What do we need to go there bloody for? And it would be good, that we don't go and we take all our money out, and instead of taking, benefiting them with our money, the money that can come back to Muslim countries and develop things. And develop a future and an identity that's free from an American one. I mean, can you imagine? Shock horror. Why are we imprisoned and enslaving ourselves to an American reality? So who's to know where the khair is? We don't know. And who's to know who's more important? Our concerns in Britain as people who complain about Brexit, or Americans who are suffering directly from Trump? And everyone needs to look after their own. I get that. But you know what? Other people have rights as well. Other people are around the world dying as well. I can tell you right now that there's grief and crying and tears and Facebook and Allah will be with us and blah 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 blah. It's not happening in the rest of the Muslim world. It's not happening in Pakistan or in the Arab lands or Twitter of the Middle Eastern Twitter or X or Facebook or whatever. You go back and speak to those people, they couldn't give a monkey's. They're actually thinking that this is brilliant. Get rid of Obama, who's killed more of us than anyone else has. So you know what? Maybe some other people need to be listened to. Maybe we need to stop being so self-centered and thinking that the world's only about us. Okay? So those are various a few points that I had that I just wanted to quickly share. It's not becoming upon Muslims to be so weak, to be so pathetic, to be so scared, and to be so pessimistic. That's not what Muslims should be. Having a joke, giving a general reminder, I get that. But the kind of things that we're seeing is, wallahi, the reaction is more depressing than the news itself. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. Any comments or any questions or challenges or anything like that? Yep. Of course, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us so many times in the Quran. Perhaps that you will hate something and it's good for you. Perhaps you will love something and it's bad for you. Who knows? Anyway, jazakumullah khair. Right, so we can do some fiqh, yeah?